Hello, my name is Pastor Eric Shafer, and I am the senior pastor here at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California, and this is Hope Matters. Each week on Hope Matters, we talk to an interesting person from around the community or even around the U.S. and around the world about the theme of hope, because we believe that hope matters. Our guest this week is the Rev Brenda Bos, who is assistant to the bishop in the Southwest California Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. For those of our viewers outside of this area, that is LA and some of the suburban counties. And that means that Brenda is the assistant to the bishop that our congregation and that I work with most closely. And so Brenda, we're so glad that you could be with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Brenda, I know a little bit about your interesting background of your life before being a pastor. And I think our viewers would be interested in knowing that. You have an extensive resume from your time working in Hollywood.
Yeah, I was a unit production manager for sitcoms, for multi-camera television shows for several years. Most of my career was working in sitcoms, mostly at Warner Brothers in Burbank. So a production manager is exactly that, the person that manages all elements of the production, the crew, the equipment, schedule, on some levels, budget, that type of thing. So I was sort of the foreman on a construction site type of person. I needed to know everything that was going on and everybody that was there. I didn't have to do the work, like I wasn't building sets, but I worked with the people that were. I was working with the costume designers and the office staff and that type of thing. So it was a lot of logistics in an incredibly creative environment. I worked in that for many, many years. And so I knew a lot about how you get it done, how you get big things done, and working with a lot of different personalities.
Sounds like you were the other person besides the showrunner that made the show happen.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the showrunner is much more interesting and creative. My job wasn't nearly as sexy, you might think, but yeah, really, really critical. And my personality really wanted to be kind of in the middle of everything. And so I was sort of an information hub that then got all of the logistics out to other people.
Did you have favorite shows during those years that you liked working on?
Yeah, unfortunately, my most favorite show is one that's probably the least well known. Let me just drop the big names first. I was the production manager on the George Lopez show, which of course was 4 years with George Lopez and one of the very first Latinx sitcoms that was really quite popular. I was on Suddenly Susan, which was the Brooke Shields show. Before I was a production manager, I was on The Golden Girls and Mad About You. But my favorite show was one called Nikki that was on the WB. Now it's the CW, but it's Channel 5 here in Los Angeles. But Nikki starred Nikki Cox as a Las Vegas showgirl married to a wrestler. And a key piece of that show was big production numbers of like Las Vegas showgirls that were always very funny and very unusual. So that required a lot of work from a lot of different people. And then also the wrestler did big WWF kind of crazy wrestling stunts. And so the amount of creative work and logistical work on making these big set pieces happen was why I loved it the most, but most people never saw it. It was on 14 episodes, I think now, probably 15 years ago.
Wow, cool.
So that's cool.
That's lovely work. So what made you change your life mid-career and midlife and go to seminary and become a pastor?
Well, I had always been a person of faith, and I had been very much somebody who loved church, loved thinking about God and talking about God, and had always wondered how to sort of make more sense. And then as I was working as a television production manager, a woman on our television show passed away over the weekend, not part of work, but she had died suddenly, and we decided to have a memorial service for her on our stage. And I was asked to be the pastor of that service, which was weird for me because I didn't think that I was that out as a Christian, but the community knew that I was the one that could sort of provide the best pastoral care for that. So I sort of presided over this funeral on a television stage, and a lot of people came up to me afterward and said, you're in the wrong line of work. You should be a pastor. And I kind of knew that they were right. And so it's not exactly a straight shot from that funeral to me becoming a pastor, but that was sort of the community raising me up as someone who could do that. And I did decide to go to seminary after that. And even after that, after starting seminary, determined that I'd like to be ordained in the ELCA, which is our denomination. So that was, I did a little bit backwards. I started school and then decided to become a pastor in the ELCA. And the reason I told you the stories I did about the logistics work that I did, the bringing people together and making big things happen and trying to coordinate a lot of different people, is that piece is very, very key in my work as a pastor and even now as an assistant to the bishop. But the similarities between trying to move a group of maybe 100 people forward into one idea and to get us to one specific place, I think is a skill set that I use all the time as a pastor of a parish and now in my work as the assistant to the bishop.
As you know, that makes a lot of sense to me, because here the work is juggling now 4 institutions under our banner and juggling a lot of other balls. And, you know, you have to be a good juggler if you're a pastor. You really do.
Yeah.
When I was just starting ministry, an elderly pastor said, the secret to ministry is creative neglect. What he meant was, you can't do everything at the same time. You have to decide what's more important to get to focus here on and trust that the other things will come along. There's some truth to that, isn't there?
Yeah.
So you're assistant to the bishop in this synod. What does an assistant to the bishop do, or what do you do in this role?
It's important to say, what do I do? Because each office of the bishop, we have 65 synods in this denomination all around the country. And I'm discovering that the responsibilities are split differently. So for me, in the Southwest California Synod, where I serve, I work with rostered leadership, and rostered leadership means all pastors and deacons that are capable or called to be serving our congregations. So if your congregation needs a new pastor, if yours is retiring or has moved on to another call, I'm the person that you talk to get them a new pastor. I like to call myself the matchmaker, the Yenta of the ELCA, in that I help congregations find their pastor and I help pastors find new work. I also work with people who are in seminary, who are becoming pastors and deacons, so that they know what the process is, but also help them as they discern their own sense of call, who they are, what kind of pastor or deacon they want to be. I spend a lot of time on that. I also do some work with conflict. If a congregation is in trouble or struggling, I might be somebody that's called in to help them try to navigate that or bring them resources to help with that. And a part that I'm just starting to work on is I'm also responsible for some of the educational events in our synod. And you can sort of see how that continues in that same vein. How do I lift up leaders? How do I empower congregations to be better at their work? So I'm really about sort of the well-being of pastors and deacons, but also of congregants.
So if someone watching this interview is interested in considering the Lutheran ministry, how can they be in touch with you?
So literally, they can email me at my synod office. Would you like that email address? Is that something you know? So I would say email me at bbos, and that's B-O-S, 1 S, as in Sam, bbos at socalsynod.org. And I can start a conversation about what it looks like. We can sort of make sure that you understand as a candidate what gifts you might bring, what that stirring in your heart might be signaling as to what you're interested in. And there are a wide variety of ways to get the education required. And so we can talk about all of that. And that's a big part of what I do.
Wonderful. And we should tell our viewers that people age 18 to 90 can talk to Brenda about ministry.
Yes.
Not limited to recent college graduates. As a matter of fact, about half of our seminarians are not recent college graduates, right, Brenda?
Maybe even higher, yeah. And I want you to also know the trends are changing, certainly for second career, but also people of color, members of the LGBTQ community. I think right now I have 18 seminarians and only one is a straight white male. The rest are women or people of color or from the LGBT community. That just happens to be how it is at the moment. But just to show you that we are very much trying to be welcome and inclusive and equitable. We're hoping that people from different groups actually change how we do seminary as opposed to seminary trying to change those people.
And half of our seminarians are women now, at least.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and our viewers should know, if you're not Lutheran, that the Lutheran Church has its own way of deciding on a pastor for a congregation. And if we're not the Roman Catholic system where a bishop assigns, or the Methodist system, but we're also not the United Church of Christ where a congregation goes out and looks at hundreds of candidates. Bishop or the assistant recommends, congregation approves, is how we deal with new pastors. And all of our pastors, almost all of our pastors need to have a college and a seminary degree or some equivalent. And that's what Pastor Brenda was talking about, in the sense of there's specialties for special needs and special candidates. And life experience is important too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we want people to understand that what happened in your life is deeply important in how it forms you as a pastor. I mean, of course, I'm a different pastor than I might be if I didn't work in television, if I didn't have certain understandings of communication and influence that I bring. And I'm always delighted when we have a candidate who worked in medicine or construction or education, nonprofits. There are so many different paths that can lead to what a future pastor might look like.
That's great. And for the benefit of those folks from Mount Olive viewing this, Samantha Sam Ledoux from our congregation is working under Brenda's care as she prepares to be an ELCA pastor. She's a first-year student at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary in Berkeley, as many Mount Olive people know, and yet still appears around here, especially because of COVID. She can appear on our worship services, which are recorded, and she does. Pastor Brenda is the one that works closely with all of our students, including Sam. So wonderful. So Brenda, we could talk a little. We could talk a lot about your background, but let's get to the theme of hope. In your work, where do you see hope in your life and work?
I would say the number one place I find hope these days is in the individual stories of people who are maybe in a congregation that is facing challenges. Certainly all of us during COVID are trying to find new ways, or we're trying to change systems that were in place that weren't fair, or were grinding people down. And the place I find the most hope is when somebody calls me and says, I don't know what to do. I usually say, if you could do anything you want, what do you want to do? And they always have an answer, and it always feels inspired by God. And so I think I find hope in that individual revelation that I see the Holy Spirit giving to people. And that God is at work in people in their own situation, in their own pain, in their own defeat, but that God works in so many different ways, in big ways with big groups, but also in gentle one-on-one inspiration for a person. And so I find hope when I'm on the phone with somebody who's despairing, and then they can say, actually, I do have an idea. Actually, I've been wondering about this. I didn't know that might be something to follow up on, but I see that God is saying something to me. I would say that's the number one place in my work where I see hope.
Thank you. That's a great answer. And well, we've had certainly a good conversation about this, the theme of hope. It came up naturally, didn't it, there for us? So thank you. And thank you for joining us today on Hope Matters, Brenda. It's been a real pleasure. And we'll be talking again, I'm sure.
I hope so. Thanks.
All right. This is Hope Matters, a weekly production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California. Our guest this week has been the Rev Brenda Bos, Assistant to the Bishop of the Southwest California Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And we're so pleased that you've been with us today, Brenda. We produce Hope Matters because we believe that hope matters, and we believe in a God of hope. Hope to see you again. Thank you.